Okay, we'll turn to 1 Timothy. Chapter 4. We'll read verses 7 through 9. But refuse profane and old wives' fables, and exercise thyself rather unto godliness. For bodily exercise profiteth little, but godliness is profitable unto all things, having promise of the life that now is, and of that which is to come. This is a faithful saying, and worthy of all acceptation. What is said in verse 9, this is a faithful saying, and worthy of all acceptation or all acceptance, confirms what is said in verses 7 and 8, and it also serves as an introduction to verse 10. So what is said in verse 9 states the character of what is said in verses 7 and verse 8. So verse 9, this, referring back to verses 7 and 8, more specifically verse 7, is present, continuous, and it's emphatic. It is something that's definite, something that's particular and specific. It is a faithful. That is, it is something that you can depend upon. It is certain. It is trustworthy. It's verifiable. This is a faithful saying, a statement, a report, a message. And in addition to being a faithful saying, it is worthy. That is, it is suitable and appropriate of all acceptation, or to be accepted by all, which shows that it is an all-important matter. Now, Paul writes 1 Timothy to encourage Timothy to basically two things. To be an example. Chapter 4, verse 12, let no man despise thy youth, but be thou an example of the believers in word, in conversation, in charity, in spirit, in faith, in purity. It is outward testimony. It is an outward testimony. He also writes Timothy to encourage him to stay the course. In 1 Timothy 6 and verse 12, fight the good fight of faith, lay hold on eternal life. He's telling him, stay the course. Be a good testimony. Maintain a good testimony. Stay the course, verse 20 of chapter 6. Keep that which is committed to thy trust. So be an example. Stay the course. So he gives, that's the subject basically, the summary of this letter. He gives in, so everything he says is going toward that. So we have some instruction in verse 7. And this instruction is, again, for the purpose of be a good testimony. Stay the course. Persevere. The truth is, you can't be a good testimony if you don't stay the course. So the instruction of verse 7, refuse profane and old wives' fables, and exercise thyself rather unto godliness, is paramount to having a good testimony and to staying the course. The subject of the instruction is godliness. The word godliness appears twice, once in verse 7, once in verse 8. It is the subject. It is the substance. It is the concern of the instruction given. Exercise thyself rather unto godliness. Godliness is the objective of the exercise. It is the aim of the exercise. The exercise is the activity. It is the intent. So it is the objective, it is the aim, it is the intent of the instruction, godliness. It is what is essential. It is what is necessary, mandatory to what is said in verse 12 to be a good example. It is also what is necessary to stay the course, godliness. So this being the subject of the instruction, what is godliness? We have to, if we're going to follow the instruction, if we're going to understand the instruction, we have to know. What is godliness? Again, the word appears twice in our text, and it's used 9 times in 1 Timothy, 1 time in 2 Timothy. In 1 Timothy 2:10, it is godliness with good works. So, it's not good works. You can have good works without godliness. So, godliness is not merely good works, but it's godliness and good works. So there's a connection between good works and godliness. In 1 Timothy 6:3, it is the doctrine which is according to, that is, aligned with godliness. So there's a doctrine, there's a teaching that aligns with godliness. Any teaching that does not align with godliness is false teaching, is erroneous. In 1 Timothy 6, verse 6, it is godliness with contentment is great gain. Contentment is inward, and godliness is also inward. In 1 Timothy 6, verse 11, it is follow after godliness. Pursue godliness. Again, it's the goal. It's the objective. And in 1 Timothy 3, verse 16, we read, without controversy, great is the mystery of godliness. And then the next words are important. God was manifest. He's talking about the incarnation. God was manifest in the flesh. That's in the context of godliness. God manifest. I believe that's what godliness is. It is God manifest. How does one become a good testimony? It is the manifestation of God in their life. How do they become an example? Again, the manifestation of God in their life. This is what contributes to staying the course. Manifesting God. So godliness is the display of God. It's the display of God. It proceeds from within. So, godliness is, if it's the display of God, if it's the manifestation of God, it's the part of us that takes on the character of God. It takes on God's character. Again, it's inward. It is the impression of God within us or upon us. It is the workmanship of God in our life. It is the expression of God in the heart. It is the attitude. It's going to show itself in an attitude of reverence, an attitude of devotion toward God. It is delight in God. Can't be godly and not delight in God. It no doubt involves a consciousness of God, an awareness of God. It no doubt is an attitude centered upon the Lord. It is our heart being occupied, our mind being occupied with God. So it is a right attitude. It is a right response toward God. Godliness gives you a right attitude toward God. Godliness gives you a right response toward God. Again, it is God manifest. If there is a problem with our attitude toward God, again, that's just a symptom. The root problem is a lack of godliness, God within us. If there's a problem with our response toward God, same thing. The root problem is a lack of godliness. So again, God manifests. So it's more than outward form. And we're told that in 2 Timothy 3 verse 5. We read of those who have a form of godliness. So there's such a thing as a form of it. It appears. But denying the power thereof. So godliness has power. Godliness is powerful. It's a power within us. It's a power within us. And it is so powerful in us that it manifests itself. You can't have godliness and it not be manifest. Why don't people manifest God? It's because there's no godliness. God within. So it's a power within. That means it's real. It's something, the power of godliness, denying the power thereof. That means it's intense. This godliness isn't dormant. It's something that is fervent. It is something that is energetic. So it's a force within us that works. It's a working force. This godliness is extensive. The power thereof. It spreads itself into the soul. It has a direct effect upon our spiritual understanding. It has an effect upon our reasoning. It has an effect upon our will. It has an effect upon our affections. It affects our life. Godliness is God in us. It's basically God all over us. So much so that it's manifest. It's open. To further illustrate this, the unsaved are referred to as what? Ungodly. Ungodly. That is, the natural man, apart from Christ, they are without God. Ephesians 2 makes that very clear. So they have the absence of God in them. Therefore, they do not manifest God. There's no display of God in their lives. There is not the presence of God or nearness of God in their lives. They do not feel the presence of God or the nearness of God. Exercise thyself unto godliness. To exercise is to move in the direction of a goal. So in order to move in the direction of godliness, there needs to be a value judgment. Verse 7. Refuse. That is, decline and reject. Profane and old wives' fables. Again, the word profane means that which violates, that which corrupts. When that which is sacred is put on the same level or below the level of the physical. You take that which is spiritual and you put it on the same level or below the physical. That's profanity. That's profanity. We see it all through the Word of God. The phrase old wives' fables is a euphemism for basically nonsense. Old wives' fables. That a value judgment needs to be made is seen in the word rather. Exercise thyself rather. That is, rather than profane and old wives' fables, exercise thyself rather. That is, our activity should not go in the direction of the profane and the old wives' fables, nonsense. But rather, our activity should go unto godliness. So it is, exercise thyself rather unto godliness. That word rather speaks of a preference. I'd rather have this. That is, you prefer something. So it is a preference in a particular matter. In order to have godliness, we have to have a preference of the spiritual over the temporal. The spiritual over the carnal. So the spiritual must be preferred over and above that which is secular. Godliness. That's the goal. And this preference displays itself. I prefer the spiritual. I prefer godliness over profanity and old wives' fables. Therefore, I refuse profane and old wives' fables. I refuse it. When it's a refusal of that which is secular, when it is in conflict with godliness. We have to have the secular. We live in the secular. But when the two come into conflict, the secular and the spiritual, There has to be a preference for one or the other. The unsaved are going to prefer what? They're going to prefer the secular. It's because they have no godliness. They're ungodly. But for the saved, we have a preference for godliness. And we show that preference by our refusal, but more important than that, we show it by pursuing godliness. That's what it means. Exercise thyself unto godliness. So again, verse 7. Exercise thyself rather unto godliness. Now that tells us something about godliness. Godliness does not just happen. It requires exercise. Exercise thyself unto godliness. Exercise speaks of that which is strenuous, that which is self-sacrificing. It's basically strenuous, self-sacrificing training unto godliness. And again, the phrase, exercise thyself rather unto godliness, is the means. The exercise is the means to spiritual fitness. Godliness is the means to spiritual fitness. Becoming physically fit does not just happen. You can't sit around all day and be physically fit. It doesn't work that way. Never has. It takes exercise. And the same is true spiritually. Exercise thyself rather unto godliness. You don't become physically fit by watching others exercise. Be nice, but it doesn't work that way. And you do not become spiritually fit by watching others exercise themselves unto godliness. You do not become physically fit by exercising in spurts. There has to be a consistency. It can't be a once every 2 month thing. There has to be a consistency. There has to be a pattern. So it is with the spiritual. You can't do this just in spurts. There has to be a commitment. There has to be a consistency. Exercise thyself rather unto godliness. There has to be personal desire. Now notice in verse 8, for bodily exercise profiteth little, but godliness is profitable unto all things. So he brings in physical exercise by way of a comparative contrast to the spiritual. So he mentions bodily exercise. If in bodily exercise, physical fitness has to be a priority. In this spiritual exercise, spiritual fitness has to be a priority. Our spiritual fitness should be a priority. I would rather. So, in bodily exercise, here in a couple weeks, the workout centers will be very crowded. That'll last about a week. And then it'll get down to the regular crowd. Because the New Year's caused people, you know what, I'm dissatisfied with where I am. So they begin to work. but they're not dissatisfied enough to keep it going. And in order to exercise spiritually, we have to be dissatisfied with where we are spiritually, and we want to improve upon that. There's personal responsibility. Exercise thyself. You can't exercise for someone else. And no one can exercise for you. That's true physically, that's true spiritually. There has to be a goal. The goal and object of the exercise is godliness. Exercise thyself rather unto godliness. The word unto speaks of reference to godliness. That is, our exercise is to have reference to godliness. Our spiritual activity, our spiritual exercise. It is to have a concern for godliness. So the exercise, the activity spiritually, is with reference and concern to godliness. So in all exercise, there's a goal. There's a target. And in spiritual exercise, spiritual training, the goal is godliness. And what is the prime example of godliness? Jesus Christ. It's conformity to Jesus Christ. There has to be focus and dedication and commitment. Again, exercise thyself rather unto godliness. This requires focus and attention to the activity, which is exercise, and also focus and attention upon the goal, which is godliness. So it requires dedication, it requires commitment to the exercise. Dedication and commitment to the goal. Godliness. God in us. God manifest in us. So it is a self-discipline to the spiritual. Most people have very little self-discipline. Most people. It's not something that comes by nature. In the physical realm, most people have very little self-discipline. Sadly, that's also true in the spiritual realm. Very little self-discipline. Spiritual is daily. It's moment by moment. It's a priority. It requires discipline. Now, our level and degree of godliness determines our spiritual health. It's what really determines how healthy we are spiritually. And if we're not healthy, we become more subject to disease, to danger, to difficulty. That's true in the physical realm, that's true in the spiritual realm. Exercise thyself. There has to be a personal desire for godliness. The incentive to do this, verse 8, godliness is profitable. There's profit in it. You're not going to continue in exercise if you see no profit. If you see no benefit, you don't continue. Well, what's the use? The problem is someone physically, they exercise for 5 minutes, they don't see a massive change. Well, what's the use? And so it is spiritually. Same attitude. Godliness is profitable. 1 Timothy 6:6, godliness is great gain. It is great gain. There's profit in it. It's valuable. Exercise thyself rather unto godliness. It's valuable. Godliness is useful. It's beneficial. It's rewarding to your whole life. It will be advantageous to your life. It'll be helpful to your life. Not only profitable in gain, but it's great gain. That is, it's significant. It's substantial. Exercise thyself rather unto godliness. It's profitable in everything. There isn't anything where godliness will not profit you, will not benefit you. It's profitable in all circumstances and situations of life. So there's a great wealth. There's a great value in godliness. It's profitable in all things. That cannot be said of wealth or accomplishments. Can't be said of that. But it can be said of godliness. It's profitable in all things. And then lastly, exercise thyself rather unto godliness. What's that tell us? It tells us it's possible. Godliness is possible. It's something we can have. It's a power within that manifests itself outwardly. We read in 2 Peter 1 verse 3, according as his divine power hath given unto us all things that pertain to life and godliness. We are, as a child of God, we have everything we need to have godliness. He has given us all things that pertain unto life and godliness. If one lacks godliness, it's not because they lacked opportunity. Because, again, we have all things that pertain to life and godliness. We have everything we need for godliness in this life. We're to work, exercise. We're to be active in that direction toward godliness. Again, we're called to live lives of godliness. Not by spurts, but continually. A lot of people can serve God by spurts. That's not what's required. It takes something inward to do it continually. And we have everything we need to do so. We're called to live lives of godliness under all circumstances. The circumstance is not the issue. The issue is godliness in the circumstance. So again, exercise thyself rather unto godliness. That is how we become an example to others. And that is how we stay the course. You have to exercise. You have to be committed toward the spiritual. That will cause one to be a good example. It'll cause one to stay the course. Let's look to the Lord. Heavenly Father, again,